I'm writing this from my apartment in Austin. I'm not looking for advice, just trying to understand when I started pretending everything was fine. I'm a man in my early 30s, heir to $1 million trust fund my father built after falling flat and starting over about 5 times. I grew up hearing that money is just a tool, but I learned quickly that for most people, it's either a reason to get close or a reason to use you. My last name never helped. In school, they called me the trust fund kid. I hated it. I worked twice as hard to seem normal. Spent months trying to prove I wasn't the stereotype. I should have been used to distrusting everyone. But the worst part is that when I finally trusted someone, it wasn't because I thought she was perfect. It was because, for a moment, I managed to forget the weight of my family's bank account. And that's why now, when someone asks what happened, I freeze. I don't know where to start. Maybe at the end when I realized my house smelled like perfume that wasn't hers. Or maybe the first time she called me my millionaire and laughed like it was a joke. Doesn't matter. The point is, I'm here, trying to tell what's left of a story that was never about love. It was about control, power, and too much naivete on my part. Yes, I was that guy. The one who believed honesty and hard work were enough to keep a stable life. The one who thought he could separate affection from interest. Spoiler, you can't. But before everything fell apart, there was a time when things seemed right. A cheap restaurant, easy conversation, no luxury. And that's where I let myself be fooled. It was just another Friday. I had gone to a 24-hour diner on South Lamar, the kind of place that serves bad coffee and plays 90s music through crackling speakers. Exactly what I needed. She was sitting 2 tables ahead, a laptop open, a headphone cord tangled in her hair. I remember thinking she looked tired but focused, like someone who works too much. When the waiter forgot the sugar on my table, she turned and asked if she could take a packet. It was the kind of mundane interaction that usually dies right there. But I said something like, "Only if you'll share this terrible coffee with me." And she laughed. That laugh echoed for a long time. We talked by chance. No, what do you do for a living? Or where did you study? Just short stories. Traffic, bosses, how the coffee tasted like burnt oil. The kind of talk that makes you relax because it doesn't demand anything. By the time I noticed, 2 hours had passed. Her name was Lena. She worked in tech, product management, and I didn't say a word about the trust or my family's company. I introduced myself as an ordinary analyst, and she seemed to believe it. We met again a few times at the same diner. Sometimes I arrived first, sometimes she did, always at the same time. Late evening, when the city slows down and people seem more real. One night, she told me about her ex-boss who stole her ideas and took credit in meetings. She said it with anger, but also with a spark of pride. Like, I know I'm good, even if he won't admit it. I thought that was beautiful. I thought she was everything I wasn't. Practical, confident, hungry for life. Then came the first gesture that disarmed me. The third time we met, she paid the bill before I even noticed. Said, "Next time's on you, cowboy." No woman ever did that with me. Usually they waited for me to pay for everything, even when I disguised myself as a regular guy. At that moment I thought, she's different. That's when I started to lower my guard. Over the next few days we texted. Simple, unadorned. Survived the day yet? Or worst meeting of the week. She'd send photos of bad coffee and say I was ruining her taste buds. And me, who had always avoided intimacy, started wanting to reply quickly. After a month I gave in. I took her to see my apartment. It wasn't extravagant, but anyone with a good eye would notice the expensive comfort. The paintings, the sound system, the car in the garage. When I saw her gaze moving across the room, my stomach tightened. I waited for the classic question. "So, what exactly do you do?" But she only said, "You've got good taste," and changed the subject. At that moment, I thought I'd finally found someone who saw me, not the balance. I should have paid more attention to the pause between the compliment and the silence. Introducing someone to my family has always been like opening a vault. It takes time, needs a code, and if you get a sequence wrong, everything blows up. But with Lena, it felt like the natural next step. After about 6 months together, my parents started noticing my good mood. My father, a man of few words, invited me to dinner at the club and asked if the bad coffee girl really existed. I told him the basics, that she was smart, independent, and yes, I was thinking of something serious. He just said, "Then bring her on Sunday. Let's see if she survives your mother's dinner." The dinner took place at our home in Lake Travis, the same house I grew up in. One of those magazine houses, with the smell of wood and the silence of a library. Lena arrived on time, wearing a simple dress, and brought a cake she'd baked herself. Point for her. My mother talked about that cake for weeks. During dinner, my father watched more than he spoke. He did that when he was trying to read someone. Lena spoke naturally, complimented the garden, asked questions about the family company, always with curiosity but never intrusion. When my father mentioned the family trust, the fund that sustained everything we had, she just said, "I can imagine how much work that takes to manage." It sounded genuine, or I wanted to believe it was. That night after she left, My father only said, "She's different from the others." And my mother replied, "Yeah, but keep the vault locked until you're sure." I laughed. They thought it was a joke, but that line echoed through the months that followed. It was around that same time that the advisor, the family's financial consultant, started showing up more often. His name was Robert Miller, but everyone called him Rob. He was in his 40s, married, with a young daughter, and had that air of someone who always seems to know more than he should. He managed the accounts, the investments, the legal parts of the trust. My father trusted him like a brother, and I inherited that trust without question. When the trust went through its annual review, Rob spent days going in and out of the home office. Lena, polite as always, offered him coffee, asked about reports, tried to understand how all that worked. I thought her curiosity was cute. My father thought it was premature. Too much trust, too soon, he said once under his breath when she stepped out to take a call. I ignored it. Thought he was being paranoid. After all, Lena never asked for anything, never talked about money, never suggested expensive purchases. At my parents' anniversary dinner, Rob showed up with his wife and daughter. Lena and his wife Sandra hit it off right away. They spent the entire evening chatting about travel, books, technology. I remember thinking everything was in harmony, that this was what adulthood was supposed to look like. 2 weeks later, Rob asked me to stop by for a quick meeting about updating beneficiaries. He said that since I was going to get married, it would be wise to include my future wife as a partial co-beneficiary. A matter of trust, he said, smiling. Trust. Such a beautiful word. Such a silent weapon. I signed the papers, didn't consult my parents. The vault door opened, and I didn't even notice. The wedding was small, almost intimate. A backyard ceremony at my parents' house, string lights in the trees, soft jazz playing, and Lena wearing a dress she swore was rented but looked custom-made. I remember looking at her and thinking, this is it. The calm after years of trying to prove I could be loved for who I am, not what I have. The first months were peaceful. I still worked too much, traveling between Austin and Dallas for meetings. She kept her job at the tech company and said she liked having her own income. I admired that and kept telling myself, she doesn't need me for the money. But that's when the small cracks began. The first was the phone face down. At first, I laughed. You're being paranoid, man, I told myself. But then came the little moments. She'd get a message, and her face would change. The smile was short, almost mechanical. I'd ask who it was, and she'd answer too quickly. Just people from work. I wanted to believe it. I always did. The second crack came at her company events. Lena seemed to glow near Rob. Yes, the same Rob, the advisor, now a regular at business dinners and charity galas. They had a silent language, shared laughs, whispered comments. One day, at an event in Houston, I saw them exchange a glance that lasted half a second too long. Just half a second. But it was enough to light something inside me. On the drive home, she asked why I was quiet. Just tired, I lied. She smiled and said, you work too much. You're gonna end up one of those guys who sleeps with spreadsheets. I laughed, but the joke stuck in my throat. That night, while she slept, I lay staring at the ceiling, trying to remember every time someone had warned me to be smarter. As time passed, the little gestures started to weigh more. She came home late and said traffic was hell. Her perfume changed. Floral, then citrus, then woody. Business trips got longer and more frequent. I noticed but rationalized everything. She's independent. She has the right to her own life. You're being paranoid, just like your father. The mind creates excuses when the heart is afraid. There was one specific night. I was reviewing trust documents when she leaned against the doorway and said, isn't it heavy carrying your family's legacy like that? I answered, half distracted. Yeah, but it's what keeps everything standing. She smiled, a small, cold smile. At the time, I thought it was endearing. Only later did I realize that question wasn't affection, it was a password. Our Sundays, once filled with pancakes and movies, turned into silence. She locked herself in the bedroom to work. I learned to respect the silence because I thought mature love meant giving space. But her version of love was something else. Time went on, and I started accepting that distance was normal, that adult couples worked that way, each in their own corner with schedules, headphones, and harmless secrets. But deep down, something hurt. It wasn't jealousy. It was that old, almost childish feeling of being the last to know. One night, at a dinner with her company's clients, I realized everyone knew Rob, and knew him too well. One of them laughed and said something like, you two are inseparable, huh? She shot back quickly, only when Excel lets us. Everyone laughed. I did too. But inside, something broke. In the car, the silence was thick. I asked, what did he mean by that? She sighed, impatient. For God's sake, are you getting jealous now? We work together, that's all. After that, I started changing my behavior so I wouldn't be the controlling husband. Worked more, traveled more, gave her more space, without realizing I was being pushed off the map. One October night, she came home late and collapsed onto the couch. "The flight was hell," she said, tossing her coat. I asked where she'd been. She said, "Denver." The next day, I saw a hotel voucher in her suitcase. From Miami. I said nothing. Kept it like someone keeps proof they're not ready to face yet. At work, I stared at graphs, numbers, contracts. Everything seemed solid except my life. Lena, on the other hand, was blooming. New makeup, pricier clothes, longer business trips. Sometimes I'd come home to find her dancing in the living room with a glass of wine, like life was perfect. And maybe it was. For her. One night, she showed me a new gold bracelet. "Gift from me to me," she said, smiling. I could only stare. The bracelet was the same style I'd given Rob's wife months earlier, at a birthday dinner. And then came the jokes. Subtle, venomous. Things like, "You're good with spreadsheets but bad at reading people," or, "Maybe you should let Rob handle your schedule too, since he understands you so well." I laughed. Out of nerves, exhaustion, cowardice. I made one last effort to save what was left. I invited her to travel with me to Seattle for a meeting. She declined, said she was exhausted. 2 days later, I saw a photo of her on Instagram, posted by a coworker, drinking wine in Napa Valley. Caption, "Innovation Conference, Day 2. That's when I realized the cracks weren't cracks anymore. They were craters, and I was at the bottom, trying to patch holes with excuses. My parents died 6 months apart. First my father, then my mother. 2 funerals in the same cemetery, 2 eulogies I barely remember. My father's cancer was fast. Diagnosed in April, and by late June, he couldn't get out of bed. I spent nights at the hospital answering emails in the hallway, trying to keep the business running while watching the strongest man I knew fade away. Lena went with me the first few weeks. Then she started having urgent meetings. I said I understood because I thought that's what a supportive husband should do. When he died, she cried. 2 perfect tears, like she'd rehearsed them. Then she hugged me and said I should rest and let Rob handle the trust for now. The phrase slid right past me. I didn't have the energy to suspect anything. My mother couldn't handle the grief. She died at Christmas in her sleep. Heart failure. The night before, we'd spoken on the phone, and she told me she missed seeing the house full again. "Take care of what we built, son," were her last words. I promised I would. But I didn't know that, at that very moment, what she'd built was already being dismantled from the inside. After that, everything became fog. I buried myself in work, slept through meetings, lived on coffee and anger. The house was silent, and Lena became a visitor. She said she needed space to process, that she didn't know how to handle so much sadness, that my quietness made her uncomfortable. She started traveling more. At first, a week, then 2. I'd ask where she was going, and she'd name generic cities. Chicago, Portland, San Diego. No proof, no video calls, never an extra detail. And I, running on autopilot, let it go. In the mornings, I'd drink coffee in the empty kitchen. People came to visit, said, "My condolences." I'd smile, thank them, and go back to the office. Then came the total absence. First, fewer calls, then none. One night, I got home early and found her suitcase open in the bedroom. She said, "I need to breathe. That's all." I answered, "Okay." Didn't ask where she was going. She kissed me on the forehead, like saying goodbye to a relative. Left. I just stood there, staring at the empty space she left behind. 2 different griefs. One for my parents, another for the woman who still breathed but no longer existed. In the following weeks, I lived like a zombie. Went to work, replied to emails automatically, faked normalcy. The only real thing was the silence. It was a Tuesday. End of the workday. The kind of day when your body begs for bed and your mind just wants quiet. I'd left the office early because, honestly, I couldn't stand looking at screens anymore. Everyone thought I was still grieving, and I was, just not for the reasons they imagined. I drove home with the radio off. When I walked in, I noticed the house was too clean. Her coat wasn't on the rack. I went upstairs, and what I saw was nothing. The closet open, hangers empty, suitcase gone. On the dresser, a white envelope. Inside, a note with 2 lines. "I need space. I already have somewhere to stay. Take care." No signature, no love, no goodbye. I stood there frozen. The bed was still made. In the bathroom, her toothbrush was gone, but the shampoo bottle was still half full. Half her life had evaporated, and the other half seemed deliberately left behind, like a cruel reminder that I was the last one to understand what had already been decided long ago. On the table, open bills, credit card, bank statements, hotel receipts, hotels in cities where she claimed she'd never been. Chicago, Denver, Miami. I sat on the floor, didn't even feel anger yet, just that same old emptiness, the one from the hospital, from the cemetery. After a while, I noticed her backup phone was still plugged into the charger in the closet. The screen lit up on its own, showing a notification. Reservation confirmed. Rome, 2 adults. 2. There was the answer. My stomach turned. That was it. The next day I went to work as if nothing had happened. No one noticed. 2 days after finding the note, the blinds still closed, dishes piled in the sink, the same cold coffee on the counter. The doorbell rang at 10 in the morning. I ignored it. Then it rang again, and again, and again. Hard knocks, rhythmic, insistent. "Open the door. I know you're in there," shouted a female voice. For a moment, I thought it was Lena. I jumped up so fast I almost tripped on the rug. But when I opened the door, I came face to face with Sandra. She wore a dark suit, her hair tied back, her expression sharp. Rob's wife, the woman Lena used to call friend. "We need to talk," she said, pushing the door before I could respond. She looked around, frowned. "So this is where you're decomposing." I said nothing. She sighed, grabbed a mug from the sink, and dumped out the old coffee. "Go take a shower. I'll wait." The order hit me like a slap. I obeyed, felt the hot water wash over my body and my mind. When I came back to the living room, she'd cleaned half the counter and opened the curtains. Sunlight flooded in, cruel and necessary. "Your wife ran away with my husband," she said flatly. Silence. She looked at me like someone who'd just dropped a bomb and was waiting for the explosion. "And before you ask, no, I didn't come here to cry. I came because if you stay in this hole, they'll get away with it." It took me a few seconds to process. "What?" "Rob and Lena. They're together. I saw the tickets, the transfers, the messages, everything." She pulled a tablet from her bag and showed me a series of screenshots. Statements, emails, hotel reservations, Rob's name on transactions, his card tied to the family trust, and one message from her to him. "Once we're back from Italy, everything will be ours." A wave of nausea hit me. Sandra went on, calm and cold. "He's been siphoning off small amounts for months, just enough not to raise suspicion. And she helped, as a beneficiary." My God! Exactly. I sat there staring into nothing, trying to absorb it. She took my laptop, opened the browser, started typing. "You still have access to the corporate account of the trust?" I nodded. "Good. Let's start tracking." There was something oddly comforting in the way she took control. Not sympathy, strategy. She didn't tremble, didn't stutter. It was as if her pain had turned into fuel. For the next few hours, we went through records, spreadsheets, emails, and every line of numbers was another stab wound. Subtle transfers, dates matching Lena's business trips. Everything made sense now. By late afternoon, Sandra closed the laptop and said, "Tomorrow I'll go to the firm. I've got friends in legal." "And what do I do?" "Eat something and try not to be an idiot." "Idiot?" "Yes. The kind who still misses the woman who destroyed him." She headed to the door. Before leaving, she turned back. "I'm not here out of empathy. I'm here for justice. But if you have an ounce of dignity left, you'll help me." I stood in the middle of the living room. The chaos was still the same, but now there was direction, and her name was Sandra. That night, I opened the laptop again and read the messages. Every detail, every word. And for the first time since the note, I felt something other than emptiness. I felt anger. That clean, quiet anger that comes right before a plan. In the following days, the house turned into a war room. Sandra showed up every morning, punctual as an auditor, her hair tied back, a new folder under her arm. I didn't even ask how she managed to gather so much information. I just kept her pace. We spent hours staring at screens and numbers, spreadsheets, bank statements, transfer reports. The money hadn't vanished in big chunks, but through subtle migrations, small amounts disguised as maintenance fees, consulting, or travel reimbursements. Professional work. And the professional, of course, was Rob. Every dollar stolen was a piece of a map. And the more we tracked, the clearer the pattern became. Always between Thursday and Friday, always amounts just below the threshold that required double verification. And the destination? A joint account. Beneficiaries' names, Miller and Jacobs, L. Jacobs, her name. Seeing it written on the screen felt physical, like a punch to the stomach. Sandra watched me. "Do you believe it now?" I nodded silently. She turned the laptop toward me and said, "This is enough to start, but not enough to destroy. We still need proof that she knew exactly what she was doing. And if she says Rob manipulated everything?" Sandra gave a thin smile. "Oh, she'll say that, but I know my husband. He's not smart enough to plan this alone. She was the mind. He was the tool." That night, I stayed alone with the computer, and I could see the story in every line. Each transfer was a lie spoken smoothly. Each business trip was a dinner paid with my parents' money. At 3 in the morning, I wrote the first email to my lawyer, deleted it, wrote another, deleted that one too. It wasn't fear, it was caution. If I acted too soon, they could erase traces. If I waited too long, they could run with everything. Sandra insisted on moving fast. "Trust me," she said. "I've got contacts in the firm's legal department. I know how to start without setting off alarms." In the nights that followed, we became an unlikely duo. She brought strong coffee and the eyes of a predator. I reviewed access logs and backup copies. We discovered that Rob had been using a home VPN to disguise logins into the trust's management system. He thought he was invisible. But the most revealing clue came from a trivial detail: an automated email from the internal system, archived in a forgotten folder. Subject: confirmation of beneficiary update. Date: 1 week before her first business trip to Miami. Digital signature: Lena Jacobs. Sandra looked at the screen and murmured, "Bingo." At that moment, the case stopped being suspicion. It became legal certainty, a signed line, a formal act of involvement. She leaned back in the chair, exhausted but satisfied. Now we just need to make them trip over their own lies. How? We'll let them think they're still safe. And when they come back from Europe, they won't even have their passports left. She said it without blinking, and I realized I wasn't dealing with a broken woman, but with someone in surgical justice mode. And part of me admired that. The next night, I opened a new file and typed the title, Plan A, Recovery and Exposure. It was cold, technical, impersonal. The plan was simple: make Lena believe I wanted to talk, to forgive, to start over. The bait would be my own naivete, the same one she'd exploited so well. I chose the place carefully, a small bar on South Congress, noisy enough to give background cover, but with tables far apart enough to allow clear conversation. Dim lighting, the perfect stage for a dirty little play. I texted her on a Friday. "We need to talk, not about what you think, just about us." She replied 20 minutes later. "Okay, tomorrow 7 p.m. The usual place?" The usual place was the bar. It was where I'd decided to propose to her. I almost laughed at the irony. I spent all Saturday rehearsing. Sandra helped me polish the questions, tone, pauses. No confronting, no accusing. The goal was to make her talk. I recorded everything on my phone, inside my jacket pocket. Texas law only requires one party's consent to record. And guess what? I was perfectly authorized. By myself. I arrived before her. Ordered a whiskey. My hands were sweating, but my face looked calm. When Lena walked in for a second, my body reacted before my mind. It was her. The same posture, the same confident gaze, like she'd never broken anything. She wore a beige blazer and the same perfume as always. "You look tired," she said, sitting down. "Happens. Me too. Too much traveling, you know." I gave a short smile. "Rome was nice?" Her glass stopped midair. She blinked, tried to play it off. "Who told you that?" "A hunch." She tried to change the subject. "I wish things had ended differently." "Like how?" "Without so much pain. We were good together." "Were." The word echoed. I decided to play my part. "I've been thinking a lot about that, about what went wrong." She tilted her head, curious. "And? I think we lost trust." A long, tense pause. "Do you still trust me?" she asked, with that rehearsed tone of fragility. "I trust you enough to ask." I took a breath. Why Rob made you the beneficiary on his accounts." Her smile cracked. "What are you talking about? The transfers, the hotels, the fake reports?" She tried to laugh. "You're delusional." "I am. But tell me something. When you both signed the trust update, whose idea was it first?" She shifted in her chair, eyes narrowing. "That's none of your business anymore." "It is, because the money wasn't mine, it was my parents', and you used it to buy tickets to Europe." For a moment, I thought she would get up and leave, but her ego wouldn't let her. "You think it was easy?" she said quietly, leaning across the table. "Living with your superiority, your money, your legacy?" I only took what was fair. The words came out clean, clear, recorded. My heart raced, but my face stayed still. "Fair," I repeated. "That's what you call fair." She leaned back, scoffing. "Don't pretend you didn't know. Rob only did what you always wanted, to free yourself from your family's shadow." Inside, I was shaking. Outside, I just smiled. "So that's it. Freedom." She gave a half smile, the same one that hooked me at the diner, that same poisonous curve. I stood up slowly. "Thank you, Lena." "For what?" "For saying exactly what I needed to hear." I left cash on the table and walked out. Checked my phone. Recording in progress. Pressed stop. Sent the file to Sandra. Subject: End of Act 1. She replied 2 minutes later. "Good job. Now the real show begins." The recording was the key that unlocked everything. Sandra listened to the audio 3 times in a row, unblinking. Then she simply said, "Now we don't shout, we document." And that's exactly what we did. In the following days, Sandra activated the company's compliance department, attaching evidence of embezzlement, fund manipulation, and conflict of interest. Everything was filed formally. Emails from corporate accounts, authenticated copies, official protocols. It wasn't revenge, it was method. Meanwhile, I contacted my lawyer, handed him the entire report, spreadsheets, emails, Lena's confession. He listened silently until the end, then said, "This isn't just betrayal. This is fiduciary fraud." "I know," I replied. In less than a week, the dominoes started to fall. First, Rob was suspended by the firm. Then, precautionary freezes on suspicious accounts. Next, an internal audit. Discreet, but inevitable. The transfers began appearing in official reports. The legal department contacted the state police. And suddenly, what had been a secret between 4 people turned into an open case, complete with file numbers and prosecutors taking interest. Lena tried to reach me. 3 missed calls. A voicemail. "Can we talk? You're taking this too far." I deleted it without listening to the end. That same day, her company announced a restructuring and laid off several employees, including her. Quietly, without fanfare, but the inner circle knew why. Rob, on the other hand, was escorted out of the firm by 2 security guards. An employee filmed it from a distance and posted it on a fake profile. The video went viral. Corporate executive expelled for fraud in Austin. The comments were cruel, fast, detached. The internet being the internet. Sandra called me that night. Her voice sounded different, tired but lighter. "It's over for them," she said, "but it'll still take time for it to be over for us." That same night, I received a summons. Rob and Lena's lawyer had filed for a restraining order, claiming I was digitally harassing them. We laughed. Because the request was actually the seal of their defeat. Those who run to protect themselves first usually already know they've lost control of the narrative. Still, it affected me more than I expected. Not because of the accusation itself, but because it reminded me that, to the very end, she was still trying to flip the roles. Me, the betrayed one, turned into the persecutor. The next night, I went to Sandra's house to bring printed copies of the documents for her lawyer. She opened the door with her hair loose and an old sweatshirt on. Behind her, her little daughter was asleep on the couch, clutching a stuffed rabbit. "Sorry for the mess," she said. "She had a fever." I stood there looking at the child. It was impossible not to think about how all of this would have affected her if she were older, if she understood. "Do you still sleep?" I asked. Sandra laughed. A brief, hoarse laugh. "Sleep is a luxury. But you know what's strange?" She paused. I can finally breathe. The revenge was over. Now came what really mattered, learning how to exist again. The case reached court in less than 3 months. It had a name and a number, but to me, it all boiled down to one sentence the prosecutor said at the first hearing. "It's not about money. It's about abuse of trust." The hearings were a mix of boredom and adrenaline. Stacks of documents, pages stapled with yellow highlighter marks, lawyers exchanging looks like chess players. And there I was, sitting a few meters from Lena. Same face, same hair, same practiced smile, now adjusted to look vulnerable. She tried to rewrite the story, said I was controlling, that I obsessively monitored finances, that Rob only handled the technical details. Her lawyer used pretty words: misunderstanding, poor communication, lack of clear supervision. I listened silently. My therapist, Dr. Ellis, had prepared me. "They'll try to provoke you. Breathe before you respond. Calm is your weapon." And I breathed. At every question, every attempt to invert roles, I remembered the recorded audio, her voice saying, "I only took what was fair." When the judge asked to play the recording, the courtroom went silent. Her voice echoed through the speakers, confident, ironic, certain. And for the first time, I saw her lawyer's smile vanish. Sandra was present at every session. She sat 2 rows behind me, arms crossed, eyes steady. She testified too, spoke about the transfers, Rob's behavior, the messages, no tremor in her voice. I thought, that's what truth sounds like, plain and unembellished. Rob, on the other hand, collapsed fast. He tried to pin the blame on Lena, saying she'd emotionally seduced and manipulated him into cooperating. People in the courtroom exchanged glances. It was pathetic, but useful. The more he talked, the deeper the hole grew for both of them. During his testimony, he mentioned a meeting that never happened, and Sandra subtly raised an eyebrow. Later, she told me she had copies of the emails proving otherwise. We added them to the case. Small surgical strikes, each one precise. At the end of the 3rd week of hearings, the judge closed the testimonies, said he'd need time to deliberate. When he stood, Lena looked away. It was the first time she didn't look confident, just tired. Outside, in the parking lot, Sandra caught up with me. "You handled yourself well," she said. "Did I seem calm? You seemed dangerous." She smiled faintly. The kind of calm that makes people like them lose their footing. Lena had tried to destroy me in that courtroom, but what truly died there wasn't my reputation. It was the power she still thought she had over me. The day of the verdict began like any other. Sandra was driving, me in the passenger seat, both of us silent. We didn't need to say anything anymore. We had replayed that scene so many times in our heads that now it felt like just another protocol. When the judge entered, the murmur in the courtroom stopped. He spoke calmly without emotion, reading a text that sounded almost technical, but every word was a life sentence. The court recognizes the direct participation of the defendants in fiduciary fraud, misappropriation of funds, and manipulation of corporate documents. Lena kept her eyes fixed on the table. Rob, beside her, was sweating. I stared at the floor, exhausted. Defendant Robert Miller loses the right to perform any financial management roles and is sentenced to 5 years in prison, with eligibility for early release after 2. Defendant Lena Jacobs, accomplice and co-author, is sentenced to 4 years of confinement, partially converted to house arrest under electronic monitoring, in addition to full restitution to the trust. The words blurred together, but the meaning was clear. They lost everything: their reputation, their money, their control, and ironically, also the freedom they chased so desperately. When the judge finished, the gavel's sound echoed through the courtroom. Sharp, final. A simple noise that ended 2 years of slow destruction. Sandra took a deep breath, looked at me, and whispered, "It's over." In the following days, the consequences materialized in papers and numbers. The lawyers sent reports of recovered assets, lists of frozen accounts, bank notifications. The family trust was finally restored under independent audit. Rob was transferred to a correctional facility in Huntsville. Lena remained under house arrest, tracked by an ankle monitor. The news spread quickly, but none of that mattered. I received a formal letter from the trust's attorney. The funds have been recovered. The total amount diverted represented 2.7% of the principal. Technically, insignificant. I smiled bitterly. Insignificant to those who only look at numbers. But to me, every stolen dollar was a fragment of my parents' trust, a scar in the balance sheets. This wasn't victory, it was closure. Life after the scandal arrived in silence. The first months were an exercise in relearning, learning to live without checking the phone for a message that wouldn't come. Sandra and I kept clear boundaries. No romance, no emotional confusion disguised as healing. Just 2 broken people who had learned, the hard way, the value of honesty. Her daughter, Lucy, 6 years old, became a living reminder that the world went on. Routine returned in fragments. Cooking again. Working out slowly. Sleeping without pills. One Saturday, months after the verdict, Sandra showed up unannounced. She brought brownies and a bottle of wine. "No plans, no paperwork," she said. "Just conversation." We ate on the porch. Lucy was asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. We talked about trivial things: recipes, weather, bad movies. No courtrooms, no Lena, no Rob. When she left, I looked around the living room and realized there were no more traces of chaos. The house wasn't a museum of pain anymore. It was just a house. Peace hadn't returned on its own. We built it, piece by piece, like rebuilding a home after a fire.